up on her before saying goodbye. So when it comes to Pesach, you're going to find more than one answer to the same question. And that's going to depend upon different minhagim from different communities, different families. It's going to depend upon to what degree somebody is endorsing what is generally accepted in Pesach, is that in Pesach we tend to be more machmir than so many of the other mitzvos. When it comes to Pesach, if there's any kind of question, we often go to a default of being more stringent than maybe some of the other options would allow. Sometimes there's like a difference of practical opinion in terms of how feasible it is to kasher something. Like say maybe like a dishwasher, can you really clean it enough? So it's not that people are arguing whether or not that particular dishwasher could be kashered, but this reality is, will people clean it well enough, and that might influence their final line, instead of saying yes if, knowing that something might be very difficult for most people to do. And another item, might be that, especially if we're being machmir, being more stringent, there might be times when there are extenuating circumstances, and in extenuating circumstances, we often are not, obligated to go with the more stringent viewpoint, but can rely on a more lenient viewpoint. So those are some of the factors that may lead to differences of opinions on any given question that has to do with the Pesach. I do want to thank all of you again for your patience, for allowing us to overcome to some degree this technical difficulty. And now let's start with one of the key tools of the kitchen, and that is the stovetop. So in many ways, even though some people come and they're surprised, it's like the first time in their life they had electric stovetops, but when it comes to kashering, some aspects of it, at least the burners, is a lot easier to kasher the burners on an electric stovetop than it is to be working with open flames. So for the what used to be the traditional electric stovetop, where you could see the coils, you could lift the coils up to clean underneath, as in contradistinction to a glass stovetop. But in traditional stovetop, where you have those coils, and generally what we want to do with to some degree, the exception would be a self-clean oven. In general, one of the first items really at the top of the list when we want to kasher anything is to make sure we've cleaned it, as well as we can. So, if you're having you have a bunch of hummus crumbs, lying in the well of the stovetop, so, one should really, clean those away, if they fall to places that you can't reach, so that's fine. But whatever cleaning that we can do, that within reason, that we should do, because when we kasher the stovetop burners, that's not going to really have a big impact necessarily on what's beneath it in the well. So we're going to clean our stovetop and preferably not use it for 24 hours. If the person needs to boil water or something, that's fine, but we don't want to start, necessarily getting with things that are messy. But because, but there's room to be lenient there also, since we're dealing with very direct fire. But we're gonna do our cleaning up, and then when we're ready to kasher, we're going to turn on one or two, but not more, of the coils. You don't want to have too many coils burning on high temperatures at the same time. That could damage mechanisms in your appliance. So we're going to turn a coil on and let it burn for 10 minutes. That 10 minutes should have given it certainly time to turn fully red. And we're going to let that go a little bit. I'm going to close the window a little bit because I'm getting some noise coming in from the outside. And after those two coils are kashered, shut them off. Maybe want to wait a few minutes to let the things cool off, or you could wait longer if you want, and to go ahead and kasher your remaining coils. Now, while the coils themselves are easy to kasher, there's still more to the stove top than just the coils, and so it's going to depend on what type of material you're going to have, and maybe I'll come back to and try to deal with the various options altogether, and I want to deal with those who have a stained a glass top oven. So in your pack you will have a handout, right? So okay, so in your handout you have the directions, and here's today's a forum for you to ask questions on any things that are not clear enough, and ultimately for things that might not be on the sheet, all together. So as you could see from the glass stovetop, obviously, I do endorse the fact that it can be kashered. And kashering the actual burners is the same as the traditional stovetop, except that they're embedded into and beneath the glass. But in the end, the concept is the same: is that you're kashering coils, but you haven't yet dealt with the rest of the stovetop. So in a traditional stovetop, if it's made out of stainless steel, you can pour boiling water carefully over it, because you don't want to, flood out your burners, but you can pour boiling water over stainless steel to kasher that. But if it's enamel, or if it's a glass top stove, so the pouring of water is not enough. It's good to do that, especially on the glass. It's good to do it. But it's not enough. So on the enamel stove top, as you could do for the stainless steel top, if one wanted, instead of kashering it with the hagala, the pouring of water, but on the enamel and optionally on the stainless steel top, you could cover the middle section with foil. It should be heavy foil, maybe even 2 layers of foil, because there are good chances that will get damaged a little bit. You can change that foil during Chol HaMoed, but you want to make it, thick enough that it's going to resist, some of the movement that's going to take place on the stove. To the best of my knowledge, you cannot put silver foil on the glass top, or at least you're venturing into dangerous territory, because that could cause if too much heat builds up under the foil, that could cause the top to crack. So you don't want to do that. Especially with the glass top stove top, you're going to be left with the responsibility of certainly not putting any hot food directly on that stove top, and preferably even for pots that where you might need an area, but might need to move it off of the heat source. You should have some trivets that you could put on top of your stove top, so that you can rest pots, on there. Any questions about the stove? If you're at home and you're muted, you're welcome to unmute yourselves to ask your question.
Does anybody here have any questions? Because I've noticed that from the chat.
Also, on the glass top stove, many will have a hot/warm spot. So if you want to have that accessible for Pesach, you can kasher that. We go by the general principle. The general principle is kibol kach poto, the way something absorbed a flavor that we don't want to have to deal with at a particular time. Like we don't want to deal with chametz flavors embedded in an object during Pesach. So we kasher the same way that the flavor may have entered the item. So that would mean that even though that the warm spot does not reach the type of temperature that we usually kasher with, that we use for the stove top or for the oven, that warming spot's not going to reach that same temperature. But whatever its highest temperature is, one can burn it for an hour on that temperature, and that will cover kashering that warming spot. If your stove is adjacent to cabinets, I understand it's advisable to open up the drawers to, that are adjacent to the stove top, and when you're doing the oven, the same for the oven. If they're adjacent to drawers, to open it up so as to also to help you steer clear of any type of damage to what's next to the appliances. But when it comes to ovens, like the best thing is to have a self-clean oven. For a self-clean oven, any visible comments you should wipe away, and then you can proceed with your self-cleaning. It is best to wait 24 hours before cleaning the self-cleaning, certainly for other types of ovens. So, but you are, but then when you run that self-clean, even if there are some particles of chametz in the oven that you weren't able to, to wipe away, so that self-cleaning is going to destroy them. And so that's a very high level of kashering an appliance. A continuous clean oven is not a self-cleaning oven. So a continuous clean oven is going to need to be kasher the way a traditional oven is. You have to clean it, wait 24 hours, and run it on its highest temperature. So it's only usually we're talking about 550 degrees to kasher it. By the way, in the self-cleaning oven, the racks do stand a chance of getting discolored. So it's up to you if you want to leave the racks in or not. Maybe by this time, they've already become discolored, so it's not going to matter. But if they're shiny, like they were when you got them, or close enough to it, if you could take them out, but then you have to kasher the racks by putting them in and doing kashering them at 550 degrees. So the self-cleaning is much higher than that. So it does have more of an impact. And if you do leave the shelves in, so you probably will need to put like a little olive oil or something on the sides of the racks in order to get them to slide out more easily. If also on self-clean ovens, some ovens have different levels of self-cleaning. If you really want to use the regular types of self-cleaning, like self-cleaning light or steaming cleaning, it's not adequate for an oven. So you want to use what I'm calling a regular self-cleaning cycle, and not the light, not just a spray. If some of you have hot plates that you're looking to kasher, again, clean well, let it stay 24 hours, and let it run on its highest temperature for an hour. If the material of your hot plate allows for silver foil to be placed on it, then do that. But don't do it if it's if it doesn't allow it. If it's glass, probably you shouldn't be putting foil on it. But do not put food directly on that hot plate surface. So you have to have it in some other type of receptacle. Microwave oven. I'm trying to go a little bit faster to make up for time. But if you have a question, you're welcome to unmute yourself, or if you're already unmuted, just to speak up. The microwave oven, again. Clean it well, check the tops, the sides, the window. the vent is the area to, it's also clean. And after you do that, let it stay for 24 hours. And then you're going to take a styrofoam, well, what you should do actually is to remove the glass tray. The glass tray is something that's going to be similar to the top of a glass top stove. So after the tray has stayed unused for 24 hours, the glass tray in the microwave, anytime after 24 hours, you will pour boiling water over that. But it's not halachically necessarily for sure that that's adequate for kashering it. So you want to cover it, whether it's with saran wrap, some cardboard, a substitute, some styrofoam, or take a thin styrofoam, put over it, or buy a new plate that you keep just for Pesach. But we're not kashering it the same way we're kashering the microwave. The microwave is going to be kashered with steam. Basically, it's it's cooking by having its the particles being reacted on, and it's not really generating the same type of heat that our ovens are generating when we cook. So after the 24 hours, we're going to kasher with steam by filling a styrofoam cup 2/3 of the way, and put it to one side, not against the wall, but between the middle and one of the walls, and you probably have to let it cook for about 10 minutes. It takes a while to boil up the water, and then what we want is for the water to generate steam. The steam should start filling the microwave chamber and starting its kashering process. When that 10 minutes is up, it's probably advisable just to wait a few minutes for things to cool down. You might want to open up the door to help things cool down. Everything should be done carefully. Take a second styrofoam cup, because the styrofoam cup, is being impacted by the heat. We don't want it to, to burn. So take a second styrofoam cup, fill it up 2/3, and put it on the other side of the oven, midway, and go through the process again, so that we're generating more steam, and we're being confident that the steam actually filled the whole chamber of the microwave. And then you'll, again, after pouring the boiling water over the plate, you need to cover it in some way. Any questions on that, or what came beforehand? Okay, countertops. So a lot of countertops can be kashered, at least the materials are open for kashering. You have at the end of your packet, you have not a complete list, but a pretty exhaustive list of materials that can or cannot be kashered. The list is mostly yeses. So if you want to kasher your counter, you're welcome to do that, as opposed to covering it. But again, you want to, clean your counter well. If you have any types of seams that might have, that might be maybe below the surface, and you can't, reach them carefully, so maybe you could cover them with a piece of masking tape if you're kashering the counters. Because if the counter was very old and had a lot of scratches in it, could ask me personally at the right time. It might compromise the ability to kasher, but assuming we don't have those possibilities, so clean it well, and then you would pour boiling water. You have to pour boiling water on the whole surface. It's a tedious job. Probably should be done with 2 people. You want to have some towels around, so you're protecting where the water is actually flowing to, and not damaging anything that might be adjacent to your counter, or not flowing off the counter and winding up on you, God forbid. So you want to use towels to to help contain where the water is going. You want to use vessels that you're comfortable. Don't make it too big because it might be hard to handle. So it might be tempting because you're getting a lot of water at one time, but you do things that you're able to manage. Excuse me for a moment. An alternative to kashering the countertops is to cover them with shelving paper or whatever it might be, aluminum foil. Again, if you have to change any of those during Chol, you can do that. Sinks. So if you have a stainless steel sink, you can kasher the whole sink. Again, you would clean the sink well. It's probably preferable to buy a new strainer for the strainer, or else you have to clean it well. That's it could be a tedious job. And you want to make sure that your sink actually is not used with hot water for 24 hours. Because we want whatever flavors are been absorbed in the sink, we want them to begin dissipating on the Torah level after 24 hours. In most cases, whatever flavors were absorbed by the material have already turned repulsive and don't present the kashrus problem. It's midrabanan on the rabbinic level that we're concerned even beyond the 24 hours, but it's always good to be out of the realm of the Torah level of restrictions, and then we could apply other kashering features to it. So in order to protect against having hot water come into the sink, you have one or two options. One is more sure than the other. The one that's more definite is to actually turn off the hot water valve to your water supply. It takes a little bit of dexterity. I've been told that it's before one closes the valve, it would be good to spray some WD-40 on the exposed part of the valve that you're going to close, because that will make it easier to open and close it and prevent, I think, also prevent any kind of dripping. But the alternative to that is to put a sign up, on your sink. If you have different, different handles for hot and cold. So on the hot handle, put a sign on, or write a message on it on a piece of masking tape to remind yourselves not to use the hot water until your kashering process is complete. After the 24 hours, so you should start by kashering your faucet. So you would pour boiling water on top of the faucet. If you have a hot water dispenser, you should let that run, spewing its own flow of hot water, and then simultaneously pour hot water from your pot that's been on the stove. That's a kli rishon, a level 1 pot. You take the same as with the countertops. It's not hot water from the faucet we're talking about. We're talking about boiling water. I want to get back to the countertops for a moment, in a moment, and for a moment. So you'll pour boiling water on top of the hot water spigot, and then you'll carefully, also with towels around so the water doesn't go beyond your control, you'll start kashering the other areas of the sink. If you do not have a stainless steel sink, you might have there are other materials besides for stainless steel or enamel covered. The list of materials I don't think is as long as materials that you can use. It might have as a countertop. I do know that corian is sometimes used in a sink, so that's a kosherable surface material. So if the material is on the list, so you can also kosher the sink, like you can kosher stainless steel. If it's not on the list, and particularly if it's the enamel, you have to clean the sink well. And I'm just looking at what I gave to you in your handout. I want to see where we're up to. We're on page 3. So in page 3 at the bottom, it reminds you that when you're preparing your boiling water, I think maybe it's on page. It's not, and I'm using a little bit older. I don't remember if I updated it, but there was a reminder to, also to use smaller vessels that you can, smaller pots that you can actually handle well and are not a problem of weight for you that might compromise the experience. So after you clean the sink well, let it stay also for 24 hours. We want to get beyond that that Torah prohibition time frame, and and then you would cover the sink surfaces with some type of covering, and more important, to use dish pans in the sink so that your Pesach dishes are actually going into a self-contained unit, and you're preventing them from making contact with other parts of the sink. When I was talking about the kashering counters earlier, and during the years, people bring up the question sometimes, well, can you kasher the countertop with a steamer? So no, and maybe. The countertops need to be kashered with hot water. So the question, and not with steam. So the question would be, is the steamer that we have at home actually going to produce water? So if you asked this question several years ago, the answer was a definitive no. And for sure, it was only more of an industrial grade steamer that would wind up either directly or as a consequence producing water. But lately, there are, I think there's a limited number of still household, but this is being a higher bracket machine, but still available, more for the regular consumer, that is actually either expelling droplets of water along with the steam, or because of the intensity of the steam and being held long enough in one place, that the steam is, has enough H2O that it's actually going to become that hot water on the countertop. So you need to have the hot water, which is not steam, but some high grade steamers will also turn the steam into water, or have water droplets coming out together with it. Any questions? Okay, so page 4, kashering by Hagala. And our silverware, if you're kashering silverware, you're going to be kashering it by Hagala. Kashering Kiddush cups, the one of the very common ways of kashering a Kiddush cup is by Hagala, immersing it into hot water. Kiddush cups, since they're more limited in their use, could be kashered usually, unless you've used them for hot common sticker things. So Kiddush cups could also be kashered by pouring boiling water from the stovetop, onto the Kiddush cup. But for silverware, the default process is really that they are immersed into a pot of boiling water. Now, the popular question in this category usually is, well, what pot do I use? Do I use a Pesach pot? Do I use a Hamandik pot? Can I use a Fleischer pot, even if I'm kashering Milchik's silverware, and vice versa? And the answer is there's a lot of flexibility here. What you want is a pot that's clean and has not been used for at least 24 hours. And, and then it could even be a humitzvah pot that you're using to kasher. And again, you want boiling water, and you want to be, that water always has to be boiling. So when the item only has to stay in the boiling water for, several seconds. When it comes out, we're supposed to, rinse it off in cold water right afterwards. So we don't want that hot item being exposed to other things. Now, it could be, especially for silverware, that you might not want to take each piece out after kashering it, and you have a few pieces in. So just some of the important rules to keep in mind is, again, since the water must always be boiling before you put an additional piece in, you have to make sure that what you've put in already did not temporarily reduce the boiling point of the water. At some point, if you put enough materials into the pot, it can cause the boiling to disappear for a short period of time. So you just want to make sure it's always boiling, and you want to make sure that every surface of the item that you're kashering, here we're talking about silverware or kiddush cups, that every surface is actually surrounded by the water. When we are tovel dishes in a mikveh for their first use, the entire vessel has to be submerged in water, and without our fingers, touching it and blocking any surface. For toveling, we need something to be under water in the purifying water, whether it's the mikveh, whether it's the ocean. The whole vessel has to be submerged at one time. But kashering can be done in sections, so that if you have something that's longer than the pot, but if you put, like, you have a ladle, and you could put 2/3 of your ladle in, but 1/3 is going to stick out of the pot. So you'll carefully, when the ladle, you'll get the ladle to your cold water supply, you'll rinse off, and then you could take the kasher part of the ladle, hold it from that end, and stick the opposite end into the pot. So you can kasher in segments, but you do have to make sure that every surface has been taking place. So again, if you're putting multiple things in the pot before you start taking them out, just make sure that each of them has its it's definitely been several seconds not impeded in contact. So you might have a knife or that ladle to knock something around into a place where it's more open, and that everything is being surrounded by the water. Refrigerator and freezer at the bottom of page 4. Any?
Oh, you froze.
Can you? I didn't hear you.
You froze there for a second. You started saying page 4, and then we lost you. So can you?
Oh, okay. Well, all right. Well, the bottom of page 4 is refrigerator and freezer. But before I start that, I'm just asking, are there any questions on what we've done up till now?
No,
So,
not in here.
okay. So what again, one of the top rules in the kashering is that you want it to be clean. A refrigerator and a freezer, we're not kashering, technically speaking. We are readying it for Pesach use, but it doesn't go through a kashering process. It goes through a cleaning process. And when you clean out your refrigerator and you wipe down your shelves and you remove the chametz, so technically speaking, your refrigerator is ready to use it. You don't have to do anything else. So some people like to line their shelves that's the brought up that way, or they developed that minhag, whatever that might be, it's commendable. But if you have shelves that, at one time it was the only kind of shelf they made, right? But so it's a wire shelf, and things are held together because the wires are at the small distances from one another, so you could rest an item, as long as it's wider than that space, you could rest an item on it. So in that case, you don't want to block the air circulation in those refrigerators. So if you're you wouldn't want to put silver foil on unless you're also poking holes in the silver foil. Like if you were to buy, I don't know if they still sell them now or not, but certainly at one time they would selling those a plastic tray meant for refrigerator shelves, and they would come with pre-made by the manufacturer holes in that plastic, so that would allow the air circulation. So if your refrigerator has the wire racks, you want to make sure that there's circulation. So either you make sure there are holes that allow the air to circulate, or you don't need to cover the shelves. If you have glass solid shelves, so obviously the glass is blocking the air circulation. So as long as you're not covering up some other area on the side or something, you could put some type of item on the shelf, but you're not obligated to. Once it's clean and it can be used. Many people ask about kasher in the dishwasher, and for sure, I know that there are those that would that shy away from approving kasher in the dishwasher. Again, the biggest, even though it's open to controversy, maybe if there's an equal contender for that big state. But in my opinion, the biggest issue is just to make sure you can rid that dishwasher of the chametz. You want to make sure you clean it. You want to check the gaskets in the door. You want to make get to the drain, and to make sure that you remove the food there. And then, so after you've cleaned your dishwasher, you're going to, the steps are here on the sheet. You're going to clean it by running a cycle. And you definitely want to make sure that there's soap in there, because if somehow there's some chametz that you were not able to reach, so that soap will essentially override the attractiveness of the taste of that food, and it won't present a problem. But don't rely on that as a starting point. The chametz that you can remove, you should remove, but then you'll run that heated cycle with soap, and when that's finished, you give yourself a 24-hour break, not use the dishwasher, and then sometime after this 24 hours, you're going to come back, run another cycle. But this gets a little bit trickier. We want to, especially in the more modern dishwashers, which reach higher temperatures, where we want to add hot water that's going to add to the temperature of the water, because the dishwashers don't get as hot as boiling water usually. And at the same time, it's going to be adding steam to the dishwasher. So when it's in the wash cycle, you're going to have two smaller pots lined up, and then you're carefully going to, spill the water against the walls, and you'll get those two small pots of water in, and then immediately close the door and press the button to have your cycle continue and finish. And when that cycle finishes, you'll have a kosher Pesach dishwasher. Okay, now questions. That actually ends the printed packet. There definitely are other areas, but I'm going to leave that to you since it's after 12. So you tell me if you have any other questions. Now's the time to ask. Going once. Going twice.
Anyone? No one? No question?
Oh, I have just one
Have
brief
I-
question. Hello? Oh, I'm
Okay,
sorry.
Wendy first, and then was it Robert who?
Yes.
Okay, so Wendy and then Robert.
Oh, thank you, Rabbi. I'm just wondering if the link for printing, for downloading and printing the materials will be live,
Yes, it
available.
should, to my best of my knowledge, should be. Andrea, did you hear that?
It was in the email, Wendy. Just go
Oh,
back.
okay.
to the email.
Right.
Open.
Oh, okay.
Right.
Thanks, Andrea. So it'll be live,
It's
so to
there.
speak.
If you have the, right, you have the link,
It
you
already
can
is.
access.
Uh-huh. Okay, thank you. Mhm.
Robert,
Yeah, we're going to can you hear me?
yes.
Okay. We're going to a rented house in near Orlando. We're leaving here on Thursday. We'll get there like Thursday afternoon. And they want to start cooking on Friday. I don't think it may not be 24 hours. What do I do? What should we do? What do I, they'll do whatever they want to do, but what's the right thing to do?
I would, it would, you're ready through a corporation that's doing this, or you're ready through a private house owner?
I don't know. My
Well-
friend's daughter did this. I have no idea.
Okay, well, you might want to ask the question, and then if it's other than what I'm going to suggest, to call me, privately. As far as I know, most of these are, run by, professional companies, so it's highly unlikely that they're going to be having an occupant in that house on Thursday,
True,
Right.
right? It's
so-
already 24 hours not used.
Right, or maybe even Wednesday. I would imagine that whole week, if not longer, is going to be empty. So, which, yeah, if you could get some kind of, first, try to clarify, who's running this, if it was just, if it's a regular person who packed up their belongings to a degree, are you going into a house that's gonna have people's clothing hanging in the closets? Probably unlikely.
Probably not.
Yeah, so,
We had
but you
20
could.
people. We had 20 people in the house for Pesach.
Yeah.
8
Yeah.
rooms. Crazy.
Right, yeah, I'm assuming that there's no problem, in terms of that 24 hours since it was clean. You could try to verify, but it would seem to me not the most responsible thing from the company's point of view to have somebody in the house sooner than that, but we could find out a little bit more. Let me know if there's a question.
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome. Any other questions? Okay, so I want to thank you, all of you, for being on, even those who have, already signed off or left, and thank you for your patience with our technical difficulties. And you know where to find me if you have a question.
I'm gonna
And-
post, I'll post the video too. I'll have to edit it. I'll edit it to get rid of all that beginning stuff. So it'll start right when you actually start.
Okay, great,
So-
thank you.
So people
Thank you,
can see
Rabbi.
the Video
Okay,
on our website.
okay, thank you, Andrew, for all your help. Thank you.
All right, I wish
And
it
thank
was
you, Elaine,
better.
for your thank you.
You're welcome.
All
Feel
right,
better.
Bye.
Thank you. I'm already feeling better.
Okay, good.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm gonna log out.
Okay, you have to, yeah, you end the meeting.